You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no slappiness, no coddling, no pop culture, no conspiracy theories, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast.com. Follow us on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Michigan_Truth, and like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, CastBox, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast via iTunes, and Spotify, and like Stables Media on Facebook. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there.
And welcome to another episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. Taylor Phillips, Ed Smith, and Frank Vashner here. Our opening statement, the Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team is getting even better after their win over the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ed, what is your opening statement?
Opening statement is that now I think it is time to believe in this team, in this Michigan Wolverines basketball team, as a serious national title contender.
All right. Frank, what is your opening statement?
My opening statement is the Michigan State Spartans have finally found a way to get up off the mat and win at a time where they need to win most. And a memorable quote from Aaron Henry summarized that up, which I probably won't repeat on the air, but it's good to see him take leadership and be that lead dog for the Spartans.
Yeah, they beat Indiana and then Illinois, for goodness sake. And we'll get to those momentarily. Before we get started, we want to remind everyone to download the all-new social sports mobile app, Viget. Enter the referral code STABLES with a capital S and the letter B lowercase in the middle for Stables Media when you sign up. Available from the Apple App Store and Google Play. Download the Viget app and sign up with the referral code STABLES for 1,000 Bitcoins for free. Yes, got Lions, Red Wings, Pistons, Michigan State, Michigan, and even a little bit of Tigers, and then 5 questions. And the Tigers, when we get to them, we'll do the What's Your Grade segment real briefly. So let's get started with the Lions. Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reported that wide receiver Kenny Golladay is a strong franchise tag candidate. The window was open yesterday to use the one-year tender. The Lions and Gallaudet had talks last year about a possible contract extension and are going to try it again this year. If they fail, then they are expected to tag him. So we're going to go to Ed first and then Frank. Ed, just a situation where the Lions can make one of two options.
It is. It's either you have to eat the bullet and take the franchise tag to at least ensure that your wide receiving core in depth isn't a complete barren wasteland by the time next season starts, or you take your chances and you let Kenny Golladay walk away and get nothing in return. That's really your two options at this point. I think knowing that they want to give Jared Goff as good a spot as possible, at least some measure of weapons, you would do whatever you can to, at the very least, keep Kenny Golladay for this upcoming season. As for next year, it's up in the air. If they were really serious about giving Golladay the extension, or at least close to what he wanted, this would have been already done by now instead of this possible back and forth of a potential franchise tag. I don't know if you want to blame the Lions side on this or if you want to think that Gallaudet deserves some culpability here, but this is not a brightly managed situation, whether it was by the old regime or the current regime. And it needs to get rectified sooner rather than later because you don't want this hanging over your head throughout all the training camp. So if I was the Lions, I would probably lean towards getting the franchise tag because, again, you don't want Jared Goff to be completely on an island by himself here.
Yeah, I would do so as well if I'm the Lions. Frank, your turn.
I definitely agree with that they probably should franchise tag Gallaudet, but I also have to think that while he's under the franchise tag, you probably have to look at making it a non-exclusive, which means that it gives you the opportunity to continue to hash out a longer-term deal. But if that can't get worked out, then you can trade him and get compensated properly in return. Now, I have heard that the asking price for Gallaudet, if they do trade him, is a second-round pick, and I'm not really sure who would have the capital in order to acquire him via trade. I would say look at a team like Miami, who's got multiple picks in the second round. If you want to get something in return for him, and then you possibly use one of those draft picks to get a new wide receiver in, as there are going to be plenty available in the draft, and I'm not sure if who the options are in free agency, if there's anyone good for that matter. But yeah, I think that franchising him would be the right move for now, and then try and at least hammer something out where you're not breaking the bank to sign him, and if it doesn't work out, you can at least move him somewhere and get some draft capital or maybe even a player in return.
Yeah, that's a good deal. So,
not to mention the fact that, depending on who could potentially be there at 7, if you want to get not necessarily 7, but or in the second or third rounds, if you were potentially go through this trade route with Gallaudet, you at least have another piece, another asset to where you can get a potential mid-round replacement for him if you don't feel so confident, let's say, taking a Jalen Waddle at number 7, and you rather want to wait till the second or third round to get a new wide receiver.
Yeah, even more good details right there. So, that's Lions. The Red Wings are next. General Manager Steve Yzerman believes the NHL should push back the 2021 draft just to give the younger players more time and an opportunity to play in other leagues, such as the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League, and the WHL, Western Hockey League. It is currently scheduled for July 23rd, but we're going to go to Ed first and then Frank again. Ed, that's a pretty good idea by Steve Yzerman. Hopefully the NHL listens.
I think they'll take Yzerman's words into consideration if more general managers and more prominent front office people from different teams were to step on a branch and speak out about it the way Yzerman has. That would give him more traction, more support, and will cause the league, and specifically Gary Bettman, to possibly take another look at this, as opposed to what's currently scheduled. I think from what I have originally been hearing or reading that one possible plan could have been to push it to the summer 2022, which potentially could have meant in looking at a situation where the league will be having back-to-back drafts. I don't think they're going to be looking to go that route and create too complicated of a situation. Now, I understand with the pandemic breaking out last year the way it did, a lot of things were, in terms of preoccupied time or having the right essentials that you need, a lot of that was taken away from some of these prospects, and understandably so. But you don't want to make things too conflicting or too confusing of a situation. So I don't think if they would push the draft back all the way to next year. I could see a scenario where instead of in June or July, you could push it back to maybe September, if not October. But then again, you don't want to be too close to the start league of the new, the start of the new league year. So there's a compromise that you got to find a way to work out in and of itself. Again, I don't think if they do pull it back or push it back, it won't be all the way till next year. So I'm not sure if that's what Yzerman wants, or if he wants a shorter time frame. That's yet to be revealed or discussed. All he said that he wants it pushed back. To what extent, we don't know for certain.
Nope, we don't. Frank?
I mean, I definitely agree with Yzerman from the point where you want to push the draft back in order to evaluate guys that are playing in the O and the Dub, because their seasons haven't started yet, and you're probably not going to be able to get a good enough look at them by the time they do, because obviously the Q and NCAA will be in full swing. I think NCAA will be in postseason action by that time, so I can't really blame him for wanting to push it back. As for how long it should be pushed back, I'd say August or maybe September at worst, because I think you also have to consider when free agency starts, which I do not know if it'll start on July 1st like normal, since the season will be done by then, because last year it didn't open up until I believe it was October 1st due to the pandemic. So I think I would still say have your draft before free agency, and I think you got to work something out with the Players Association where the new league year would probably have to start on, say, somewhere mid-August if you want to push it back enough, so that way you have enough time to evaluate all your guys you're planning on drafting or bringing in for interviews and things like that. There's a lot of moving parts to this, but I would say move it back to August. Don't move it to next year, because that's just going to open up a whole other can of worms.
Right. Those are all the good options there. We'll see if the NHL listens, like I said before. Red Wings lost to the Florida Panthers 7-2, and then they beat the Florida Panthers 2-1. Nice recovery after that rout loss. Matthias Brome, his first NHL goal. Patrick Nemeth, first goal of the season. Jonathan Bernier, 38 saves in that 2-1 win. Then they got blanked by the Nashville Predators, 2-0. Matthias Brome, Alex Biega, and Danny DeKeyser and Franz Nielsen have all been put on waivers thus far. And the Red Wings play another game against the Predators Thursday night at 7:30. Then they got the Chicago Blackhawks at United Center Saturday at 8 and Sunday at 7. And then they got the Columbus Blue Jackets next Tuesday at 7 at Nationwide Arena in Columbus. And then a week from Thursday, they're at the Carolina Hurricanes at PNC Arena at 7 o'clock. So we'll go to Ed and then Frank, like we always do or usually do. Ed, let's get to the players being put on waivers. Matthias Brome had so many opportunities, like Ken Daniels of Fox Sports Detroit mentioned, but he finally got his first goal. But they've all been put on the taxi squad: Biega, DeKeyser, Brome, and Franz Nielsen.
Yeah, I think that's due to the fact that even though they were put on waivers, no one else or any other team wanted them or claimed them. So that's the reason why. It's basically an emergency situation if, say, for example, a player or a group of players aren't unable to be available for a brief amount of time, whether it be COVID protocol or whatever, most likely that, then you have someone from the taxi squad fill up, come in and take their spot. That's really all there is to it. If you want to call it the taxi club, I call it the healthy scratch club. That's just my view. DeKeyser doesn't surprise me. He should have been gone years ago. That was just another example of Kenny Golladay doing his Breakfast Club loyalty boys a solid favor, and it ended up hurting the team and the franchise in the long term. So there's that. As opposed to what we saw over this past week with the team itself in terms of performance, again, the constant continuation of the offense either not doing enough or just completely being inefficient. I understand shots on goal and high quality shot opportunities and going off a post here and just not being in right position. But at some point, you've got to do better than what you're currently doing right now, because 2 goals or less a game, that's one reason why your record is where it's at right now. 2 goals or less a game is just not going to get it done in today's NHL, where you wanted to rely on your goaltender to stand on his head for 60 minutes. It's just not cut out that way anymore. And if it's not the offense doing well on full strength, God forbid if it gets to the penalty or the power play, because they have been the absolute worst team out of all 31 in the entire National Hockey League this year when it comes to power play in terms of production, percentage, conversion, all of that. You look across the board. Even advanced stats tells you the Red Wings are the worst. And another thing that keeps popping up, as we saw against Florida and in the first game against Florida and then this recent game against Nashville, takeaways, or I should say giveaways. Too many turnovers. When you have double digits in giveaways, that leads to breakaway opportunities for the other team, leaves you out of spot, out of position on defense, which can lead to goals. I haven't seen too many of those this year, but still, when you're constantly putting pressure on your goaltender like that, but by constant giveaways and turnovers, again, that's another recipe that's not going to bode well for your team in the long term. And as we've seen so far, between lack of offense, horrible power play production, and now with these giveaways, something that we saw at the beginning of the season, it goes to show that, if Steve Yzerman is keeping close eyes on this, he has to know that at some point, probably not in the middle of the season, but at the end of the season, that he has to move in a different direction from Jeff Blashill. We're going to keep repeating this ad nauseum, but it has to be said. We tried to get the guy as much chance as humanly possible, but it just hasn't worked out. So now it's time to go in a different direction.
Yeah, and like you pointed out, the Taxi and Healthy Scratch Club, it's kind of like that. It is kind of the same thing. And their power play, to your point, the Red Wings have been over their last 36 on the power play. 0 for 36 over their last 36.
They got the same amount of power play goals as you and me and Frank combined, and we're sitting here talking about them.
Yeah. And turnovers, too many turnovers, meaning that they're not coached enough by Jeff Blashill and his squad. Not even Dan Bilesma can coach them either. You got to have a real NHL head coach, except you just don't need Dan Bilesma to take over as permanent head coach. You can use him as the interim head coach if you're going to fire Blashill sometime mid-season. Frank, Ed made some good points. What say you?
Yeah, I happen to agree with Ed 100% on everything with lack of production, turnovers, and all that good stuff. But as for Jeff Blashill, who still seemingly has a job at this point. It's worth noting that the Montreal Canadiens today fired Claude Julien. The Canadiens are actually having a somewhat decent year, and they're being productive, and they decide, this isn't good enough. We're firing you, Julien. Goodbye. And yet,
that was after their 5-4 overtime loss in Ottawa.
Yeah.
They thought they won it at the end of regulation, but a controversial no-goal call due to what the referees thought was goaltender interference. I saw it early this morning on NHL On the Fly on NHL Network. And what do you think of that call, by the way, as we, not to get too much off the format here?
I would have to see it for myself in order to know what happened because I had to be to work this morning. But all that aside, look, the Red Wings, I know people say that there's no talent there, but a lot of what we're seeing, the turnovers and lack of production, you can attribute it to one thing, and that's effort. Effort falls squarely on coaching. Therefore, Steve, pull the plug, get Blashill out of town. If it means Bilesma's got to be the interim coach, so be it. I think at this point, anything's better.
Yeah, the players need something to give them some type of motivation to at least finish out this season with as much dignity as possible. So if it means cutting the cord on Blashill mid-season, so be it.
Yeah, by all means, fire Blashill. So there you go. The Pistons, right now they lead the New Orleans Pelicans 69-64 at halftime, even without Jeremy Grant, who's just resting. He's not injured. He's just resting. But before that, they lost to the Memphis Grizzlies at FedEx Forum 109-95. Then they lost 105-96 and won 105-93 at the Orlando Magic. They split that doubleheader at Amway Arena. Now they're at the New Orleans Pelicans, like I just mentioned before. They lead 69-64. The Pistons do. They're home against the Sacramento Kings Friday at 8. The New York Knicks Sunday at 8. That's at home. And then they go to Canada, play the Toronto Raptors Tuesday at 7:30, unless the Raptors play elsewhere in America due to COVID.
I believe they play in Tampa, Florida.
Yes, they are in Tampa.
Thank you. All right, that's what I was thinking. Yes. And then they're at the New York Knicks a week from Thursday at 7:30 on March 4th at Madison Square Garden. So, Ed, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to Frank. Blake Griffin still out of the lineup. Pistons still pursuing a trade, but it's been a week. I don't know what's taking them so long, but the Pistons making a little bit of progress, if any.
A little bit of progress if you want to consider Jeremy Grant's production for what he's done this season. Now, I understand that he had a bit of an off game against Memphis last week, but when you consider the amount of offensive production that he has had to single-handedly carry in most games this season, that's not a surprise to me. When you consider the other players that have yet to help kick in and contribute, at least Sadiq Bey, guys like that, De'Aaron Wright, Josh Jackson are showing some promise in that regard, knowing that they can be relied upon if Jeremy Grant is not having his usual best stuff. But still, like, for example, against Memphis, they shot less than 30% from the field in the first quarter, while also shooting only 17 points. We're talking starters and bench. Now, the bench has been one of their strong points this year. I think they've averaged over 41 points per game scored from their bench. But when your starters aren't actually that high quality or they aren't fully developed yet, that may be as a reason why those numbers tend to be inflated to a degree. But it's not just the offense or the offensive starters. It's also turnovers, in my opinion. They had 20 or so turnovers against Memphis. They had 15 turnovers in this last game against Orlando. Granted, they won, but still, double-digit turnovers that nears the high teens and almost 20s. It's just ugly basketball. It's going to lead to bad spots for your defense where you're giving the baskets ad nauseum. And when you can combine that with the fact that they just weren't able to slow down John Morant or anyone else on Memphis' side of things in the second half, they gave up 21 points to John Morant in the second half alone. Jonas Valanciunas had a double-double, 17 and 15. That's just not going to get it done here. I understand that some of these players may not be adverse or well-experienced when it comes to that, but you don't want to use that as an excuse when you consider the fact that this is a full grind of a season. Everybody's going to do the same measures as you are right now, and it just comes down to the talent or lack thereof that you have on your team versus what the rest of the league has, and you're seeing the dividends. Now, as it approaches for what this means for the future, hopefully they don't get screwed again when it comes to the draft lottery, is all I'm saying. So there's that.
Right. To sum it all up in two other words, not enough. Or three other words, not good enough. Frank, now it's your turn. What say you about the Pistons? And by the way, Dylan Wright will miss at least 2 weeks with a grade 2 groin strain.
My big thing with the Pistons this year is even though their record has not been good, they're at least competitive, and you're seeing effort out of the guys. You mentioned Sadiq Bey. DeLon right before his injury. Even Saban Lee, who has had to be the starting point guard with Killian Hayes out for a long time. DeLon Wright now out, gone out and played well as well, too, and says, hey, you know what? I'm auditioning for a spot to stay on this team for the future. I'll show you what I can bring to the table. Now, as for Blake Griffin, I'm hoping that they can definitely find a spot for him, either via trade or if they have to buy him out. That way you get that contract off your books. So, that said, this team, they pretty much are what their record says they are, and you just got to hope that they don't get screwed in the lottery and they can get going back in the right direction again.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
On the point when it comes to Blake Griffin, I'm leaning more towards it. A buyout is going to happen, and he'll probably sign with a contending team. If a contending team wants them, they'll probably sign for a minimum requirement or a vet minimum. Just it will be his price will be far lower than what the Pistons will be buying him out at. That's for sure.
Good points. So, again, Dylan Wright will miss at least 2 weeks with a grade 2 groin strain. That's pro basketball and the Pistons. Now we transition to college basketball. The Michigan State Spartans men's basketball team has won 2 straight. They surprisingly beat the Indiana Hoosiers 70-71. Aaron Henry, 27 points. And then they upset the 5th-ranked Illinois Fighting Illini in East Lansing at Breslin Center, 81-72. So the Spartans are not going to have an easier schedule upcoming when they take on the Buckeyes, the Terrapins, and the Hoosiers again. And then the Michigan Wolverines, a doubleheader in Ann Arbor and back in East Lansing next week and the Sunday after that. So, Ed, got to give those Spartans credit. There's been a question on whether or not the Spartans will make the tournament with those 2 wins. Ed, what say you on them?
As of now, no. They still have a lot of work cut out in front of them, not just for the rest of this regular season, but I think in the Big Ten tournament as well, depending on where they will seed in the conference tournament and who they will match up against from a round-to-round basis. They could get an unlucky draw and face Michigan or Ohio State in the second round, for example, if they were to get past the first round. That's a distinct possibility. But as for now, for what they've done these past couple of games, it's encouraging to see, for example, Aaron Henry seemingly take control, take charge, and be the on-floor, on-court leader that this team really needs. Langford, well, his contributions helps as well, but Aaron Henry has been the clear shine-out and the clear star from an individual standpoint. Now, as for the team as a whole, they've done the usual things that you were expected more accommodated to see Izzo-led MSU teams do. They've gotten the rebounds. They out-rebounded Indiana by 7. They only trailed Illinois in terms of rebounding margin by 5, but they made up for that by tremendous on-ball defense and not giving up easy shots, which is why the top 5 ranked Illini of all teams, they shot only 40% from the field and less than 30% from 3. Whereas Michigan State, conversely, they shot over 54% from the field and 50% from 3. So when you are implementing your system and your strategy the right way, it opens up other doors to victory for you. That's what we saw against Illinois and, of course, what we saw against the Hoosiers as well. So between Aaron Henry taking charge and the team as a whole playing much better defense, at least down the stretch, in certain stretches of the game where it needed to be, it gives you some encouragement. But with the schedule that still remains, that you still got Maryland coming up, you got Ohio State coming up, and not to mention, by the way, there's still Michigan on the horizon for you. I believe they added back one of the games that was originally postponed back onto the schedule. So now they got 2 games coming up right at the end of the regular season. One on the 4th of March, the other will be on the 7th, 3 days later, at a time to be determined. But again, that is your litmus test. That is your home stretch of where you got to prove yourself, not just to your coach and coaches, to yourself, but also to the selection committee, because they're going to be keeping an eye and keeping wonder on MSU as one of these potential final bubble teams if they go on the run that most are hoping that they go on. So there's still a lot on the table here still, but you are encouraged to a degree by what you saw this past week.
Yeah. Frank?
Before the win against Indiana, I was seriously starting to question if this Michigan State team had quit. That they said, you know what, we're not going to make it this year. Streak's over. May as well just start looking ahead and start playing a lot of the guys who haven't gotten much playing time. Well, not only did they show that they haven't quit on the season by beating Indiana, they've at least shown me that they've got a leader on the floor in Aaron Henry. I mean, as a Spartan fan myself, I've wondered, where's this version of Aaron Henry been? But, it's nice to see him kind of take command. He played all 40 minutes of the Indiana game, played 39 minutes last night in the win over Illinois. But it's not just him. Josh Langford, who you kind of wondered when he was going to get back to his old self after having 2 unlucky foot injuries that kept him out for almost 2 seasons. You saw that game from him against Illinois, where he had 14 points and 16 rebounds in the win, played very well. And also, defense as a whole, they did very well against Indiana, also against an Illinois team that's got very good offense. They managed to shut down Ayo Dosunmu, who is a Player of the Year candidate in the Big Ten. And also, they did a really nice job game planning against Kofi Coburn, who is a big man who was impossible to stop. It was basically the old, okay, big men, you've got 5 fouls, use them. And they managed to make it work as Illinois struggled at the free throw line mightily. And that just shows what happens when you struggle at the free throw line. You don't win basketball games. Going forward, they have their work cut out for them. They have to play Ohio State tomorrow night in East Lansing, Maryland on Saturday. Then they've got Indiana at home as well, and plus 2 games against Michigan. The opportunity's there. I still fully believe that they've got to win out the regular season and possibly get to the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament. So there's not a lot of room for error, but if these last 2 games have shown me anything, this team knows that it's put up or shut up time. And if you're facing them, you better be expecting a fight.
Yeah. Speaking of the Michigan Wolverines, they put up a good fight against the Ohio State Buckeyes, and they won 92-87 in Columbus. The first win in Columbus for Michigan in 7 years. Hunter Dickinson in that game, 22 points. Michigan's got Iowa. They're at Indiana, and then home against Illinois before taking on the Spartans in that doubleheader, like we mentioned before, on the 4th and the 7th of March. Ed, we'll start with you again, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, first off, let's recap that Buckeye win. Again, Dickinson was the centerpiece, but they worked as a team, baby.
Absolutely. Between Hunter Dickinson with 22 points and 9 rebounds, getting what he wanted in the paint, taking what the defense gave them, saying, if you're not going to double team me, just feed me the ball and I will feast on you fools. And that's what happened. Even when he did get double teamed, he still found a way to produce. Not just that, you got 17 points by Eli Brooks. You also got a couple of big baskets, big 3-point baskets by Dwayne Washington, as well as a key layup by C.J. Walker late in the game as well. Sean D. Brown, he came off the bench. He had 15. And even Isaiah Livers had a quiet 12 points as well. So when you consider everything else, this was an absolute team effort. And against the caliber of team that they were going up against, I thought they more than held their own. You knew what you were expecting coming into this. It was going to be a battle. It was going to be a knockout, drag-em-out fight. There have been a lot of talk and chirping from the fan bases saying, "Oh, you're scared to play us. You duck this and whatnot." Well, a lot of mouths got shut up on Sunday. I don't think it's good to see. You can make an argument that this was on the level of impressive performances with both of their high key wins against Wisconsin, when you consider the fact that they had to bounce back from a huge deficit in their second game against Wisconsin after a 3-week layoff as well. And now when you have Hunter Dickinson commanding the attention that he has inside the paint and at the rim, that's only going to leave open high-quality shots for your shooters, and that's what we saw. So that's a very efficient formula that the Wolverines are going to be looking to exploit from this point on. And again, it gives more credence to not just Juwan Howard as the head coach, but what he has done in allowing and keeping all of his coaches in line and involved with the game plan to help spread out with the strategy to make sure this team has been as an efficient a machine as we have seen in a long, long time, even under John Beilein in his best years. So it's the right momentum that you need coming up upon the end of the season, but they can't get too complacent now because you got a big matchup with Iowa and Luka Garza coming up very shortly.
Yeah, that game starts Thursday at 7 on ESPN. Frank, you're up next. Just a big win for Michigan. By the way, speaking of Michigan, Ohio State, hopefully their football team is next for Michigan. They got to get their first win in Columbus since 2000 on the field, just like Michigan men's basketball just did this past Sunday.
Not only that, I think there was the college wrestling squads. They picked up a win against OSU, and I think even the women's basketball team as well. So all around, good week for the Maize and Blue.
And I'm surprised you didn't drop the remark that Jim Harbaugh should have taken some notes on how to beat his rival in their own house.
That'll be beating a dead horse at this point. We know what Jimbo has to do. We know how much he's been embarrassed by Juwan, but go on.
But all that aside, I did happen to catch the end of Michigan's win over Ohio State while I was on break at work. And I do have to say that is got to be one of the more impressive wins that I've seen from Michigan basketball, going in and beating a top 5 team on the road in that fashion, which that was actually the first time that Michigan beat a top 5 Ohio State team on the road in Columbus, mind you. So, I mean, like Ed said, this is a team that plays team basketball. You know what you're going to get from Hunter Dickinson, and he's going to get in the post and eat. Guys like Isaiah Livers, Mike Smith, Shawnee Brown, you know what you're going to get from them. And you know what? They just played well as a team on both ends of the floor. Obviously, this isn't going to be the last of the tough tests for them because they still have to play Iowa, which that's going to be a fun matchup to watch, having this Dickinson go one-on-one with Luka Garza, and plus Iowa's got some really good shooters as well. And even down the line when they have to play Illinois, you got to think Illinois is kind of ticked off after losing in East Lansing.
Yeah,
so,
and remember, Illinois, they're not out of the thick of things. They're not out of the race, so to speak, when it comes to the regular season conference time. They're only a game back of Michigan. So when they meet up, that's going to essentially decide who wins the conference, the regular season title right then and there. Ohio State still has a shot too. They're 1.5 games out, as was Iowa, only 2 games out. But to me, I think it's going to be a 2-headed race at this point between Michigan and Illinois for that regular season conference title.
I agree, and let's see what happens when they meet up with Michigan State too to end the season. I do think that Michigan is pretty close to locking up the 1 seed for the Big Ten tournament. I think they have a 3-game lead over Illinois now, if I'm not mistaken. So they'll probably have to get a win over Iowa, and probably another loss by Illinois will likely seal it up for them. So,
well, forget about just the Big Ten conference number 1 seed. We got to talk about the national tournament, because outside of Baylor and Gonzaga, it's hard to find another team that's been better than Michigan, considering they just went in and beat the head-up other team that was just beneath them for potential number 1 seeds in Ohio State. And they continue this stretch, and if they handle business against Iowa, regardless of what happens in the Big Ten conference tournament, in my view, they've all but assured themselves a number 1 seed.
Yeah, the competition's heating up.
Well, Ed, one thing I did want to ask you is, let's say Michigan ends up getting the number 1 seed in the Big Ten tournament. If you're Juwan Howard, how much emphasis do you put on winning the conference tournament, realizing that, hey, we're probably going to be a 1 seed anyway, regardless of what happens? Is that a tournament where you say, yeah, let's go out win some hardware, or we say, you know what, let's save our stuff up potentially for the big dance that really counts?
I understand the resting method in terms of keeping your players fresh and saving them for potential injury, especially, knock on wood if you lose one of your key important players. But I think this also comes to making sure that their momentum and their rhythm isn't too knocked off. So I think knowing Juwan Howard, the way that he's been this season, he's going to let his players go out and do what they have to do to get these wins. And like you said, they're probably going to be a number 1 seed regardless. So why not go out there and keep up your momentum to put you in a good spot to where you know exactly how to resume where you left off at when you start the real tournament after the conference tournament.
Yep. So after that Iowa Hawkeyes game, like I mentioned before, Thursday at 7 on ESPN, they're at Indiana Saturday at noon, home against Illinois Tuesday at 7. That'll be a good game between Michigan and Illinois. And then, like I mentioned before several times, the U of M MSU doubleheader on the 4th and the 7th of March. Now, as the Pistons and Pelicans remain tied at 89, the Tigers, we're going to go into the What's Your Great segment, brought to you by the Viget app.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your grade.
The Tigers have signed pitcher Julio Teheran to a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. Julio Teheran, a veteran right-handed pitcher, had pitched for the Los Angeles Angels. Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed, what is your grade on Julio Teheran?
My grade on this is a C, probably a C minus, when you consider the fact that Teheran, even though he is a former two-time All-Star, he's been on some recent struggles as of late. He has when you compile all his stats together, he's only above his win-loss record above 500 is only by 4 games. He has a 3.64. He had a 3.64 ERA when he was with the Atlanta Braves throughout the course of his duration in Atlanta. And when he was signed to the Los Angeles Angels last year, he had hoped to be returning to his better self. But when you consider the fact that A, he's 30, and 2, he did also go through a bout of COVID as well, that severely hampered his season, and he eventually finished 0-4 with an ERA over 10 and just over 31 innings pitched. So I think this is a move made for depth purposes when you consider the fact that they've already gotten minor league deals with Willie Peralta and Derek Holland as well. These are veterans, mind you. They're not going to be here coming for Casey Mizes or Matt Manning spots. This is veteran set pieces to help along with the young guns that you have in your rotation. Done for depth purposes. So for that, my Vivid grade is going to be a C minus.
All right. Frank, what's your grade on Julio Teheran?
I think a grade on Julio Teheran is going to be a C minus as well. I mean, granted, this is a former All-Star they brought in, but I believe his best days are behind him. So I see this as just one of those low-risk deals. You bring him in, see if he can possibly resurrect his career and be back to being a productive player. So C minus for me.
All right. Well, I'll grade it a C minus. The What's Your Grade segment, again, brought to you by the Viget app. Referral code STABLES, capital S, lowercase letter B in the middle for Stables Media when you sign up for 1,000 free VIG coins. Now for the 5 questions segment, also brought to you by the Viget app.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast.
Question number 1. Was the Michigan-Ohio State men's basketball game at least a preview of the Big Ten Championship Tournament? Ed, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Frank.
It's hard to say because, you never know what could happen on any given moment in a tournament because it's not a best of 7 or a best of 5 or even a best of 3. It's a best of 1. And if you're not on your A game or if you're having a bad outing, that could be your behind on that day. So, and that applies to not just Michigan, but Ohio State as well. So any one of these teams could have a bad day in the second or third round and get upended, and that could ruin the potential championship clash at the end of the tournament. So grateful that we at least got this great game that satisfy us. But I'm looking at bigger picture, which again carries a bigger risk as well. I don't see this as a potential Big Ten championship preview. I see this one as a potential Final Four matchup preview, especially if both these teams are on opposite ends of the region seeds. So my answer would be possibly, but look more towards a potential Final Four matchup.
You never know. We'll see what happens. Frank?
Oh, man. I think it could at least be a preview of what's to come in the Big Ten tournament, provided that both teams get through unscathed and meet in the championship game. But to kind of Ed's point, I could possibly see a scenario where they do meet in the Final Four if they are both in different regions and they meet on that Saturday. And if that happens, I would say Buckeye and Wolverine fans, get your popcorn ready because it's going to be a great show. To think that everyone would always say in the past where Michigan and Ohio State would always play for the right to go to the Rose Bowl, wouldn't it be something if they met in basketball for a trip to the national championship or maybe...
Or God forbid, if they met on that Monday night.
Oh, yes, I was just about to get to that.
It would be the apocalypse.
That's the same thing. National championship on Monday night. Yeah, that's the same thing. One can only dream, may I add.
Yeah, but we'll there's a lot that's got to happen between now and then, so that's probably the dream scenario for both fan bases.
Yeah, hell, it can even be both in the Big Ten tournament and in the Final Four.
Hey,
Imagine that.
Let's get a best of 3. Why not? I think you saw someone from, you saw a similar effect when we saw Louisville, Kentucky. They met either in the Final Four or the national championship, and right. I think it was at Anthony Davis's one-and-done year. So I can see something similar happen here with Michigan and Ohio State.
Uh-huh. Third quarter just about to come to an end with 1.6 left. Tied at 96. Zion Williamson just missed that free throw off the heel. Putback, no. Another putback, no. And that is the end of the third quarter. Tied at 96 between the Pistons and Pelicans. So, we'll see what happens there. But best of three, that would be fantastic and wishful thinking. But we don't want any of their players fatigued. Think about that. I would say just one single game each in the Big Ten tournament and the national championship game. That would be my best wishful thinking.
No, the best of three I made mention to their regular season matchup potential. And the potential matchups in the Big Ten Conference and possibly in the NCAAs.
Yeah. Question number 2: will the Lions extend or tag Kenny Golladay? Ed, we'll start with you again, and then we'll go to Frank. Ed?
I lean more towards tag because if they wanted an extension, they would have gotten it done by now. So my answer would be franchise tag.
All right. Frank, your turn. Which one will it be?
I would say they franchise tag him. More importantly, probably use the non-exclusive franchise tag so that if they can't get something worked out for a trade, or extension, then they can trade him and get some compensation in return.
Yep. Question number 3. If the NHL draft were to be pushed back like Steve Yzerman wants it to, then approximately when could it take place? Now, we've talked about this a bit earlier, Ed, and then Frank. Ed, go ahead.
Well, depending on, let's say, if the whole season ends on time and on schedule, as everyone hopes it could be, around June or July, then I could see them to accommodate some of these players or some of these GMs. They could push the draft back to September, if not October, but I can't see them going into 2022. I just don't see that happening. So my best bet would be early to late fall for the draft pushback.
Yeah, sometime in the fall, or maybe in between early and late in the fall. Frank?
I mean, as I said earlier, I think that best case scenario, they possibly push it to late July, maybe into August. Worst case, September. That's assuming that there's no stoppages due to COVID or anything like that. But I think they definitely want to avoid pushing it into next year because that's just going to open a whole other can of worms. So I think it's going to be on Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and the rest of the NHLPA to at least get something worked out where they can get it done in a timely enough manner.
Deputy Commissioner Bill Daly, yes. So, question number 4. Speaking of the Red Wings, could they use Matthias Brome from the taxi squad over Danny DeKeyser, Alex Biega, and Franz Nielsen? I would say yes, Ed.
It's always possible because they're there for a reason. Break glass in case of emergency scenario. If a player or players were seemingly unavailable for an undetermined amount of time, whether it be COVID or injury, whatever, these are guys you can pluck up from that roster. So, as a could they? Yes, if the situation depends on it.
Yep. Frank?
I would say yes, they should use Matthias Brome because Franz Nielsen can't produce anymore. And I would say also consider using Evgeny Svechnikov because they just recently recalled him from Grand Rapids and have him on the taxi squad.
Yeah, absolutely.
So why are they not at least giving him a chance to prove himself in game action?
And I think from what you saw this year, he's performed not too better. He's not having a breakout season, but he's performed a little better compared to what we've seen in years past. So I think he warrants a shot because he understands this could be his last chance. So why not give him an opportunity?
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. Free Evgeny Svechnikov. That would be our hashtag from here on forward on Twitter and on Facebook. Question number 5. If the Pistons trade Blake Griffin, if and or when, who and or what could they get in return? Ed, we'll start with you again.
I think it'll be a lesser version of what we got from the Derrick Rose deal. I think we may not get a player. If we do, we'll probably get someone that's going to be in the G League, and we'll get a unprotected second round from like 2 or 3 years down the road. That would be my best guess. If this was, because this, what we've seen from the Clippers deal originally that brought Blake here to now is a complete regression in terms of his overall value. I wouldn't necessarily say his game, but his game has suffered to an extent where we don't see him be that explosive force at the rim anymore. But at the very least, he has managed to make adaptations to his game, adding a jump shot, maybe too frequent of a jump shot, but it's there compared to what we saw even 5 years ago from Blake, who would never expect him to become a jump shooter to any type of degree. So knowing that, I think they'll get on a lesser version of the package that we got from Derrick Rose. That would be my guess if they were to trade Blake, but I don't see it happening. I think they're more than likely to buy him out.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you as well. Frank?
Put me in the camp of I don't think they're going to be able to trade him because that contract carries way too much money on it. I think they're going to end up buying him out, and he'll probably end up signing with a contending team. So he has one last shot at a ring.
Way too much money is right. So that's our 5-question segment brought to you by the Viget app. Enter the referral code STABLES, capital S, lowercase letter B in the middle, for Stables Media when you sign up. It's the all-new social sports mobile app Viget, proud sponsor of our show and its segments, What's Your Grade and 5 Questions. Sign up with the referral code STABLES when you sign up for 1,000 free VIG coins on the Viget app when you sign up for an account. Use the referral code STABLES, capital S at the beginning, lowercase letter B in the middle. Gentlemen, excellent job as always. That concludes another fine episode of the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast on Stables Media. We'll be back next week, Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. For Ed Smith and Frank Vashner, this is Taylor Phillips signing off. Follow me on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at DT2Phillips with 2 L's. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at EdSmith313. And follow Frank Vashner on Twitter, Periscope, and Instagram at Frank_Vashner, VAJCNER. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. And remember, the truth is out there. TTFN, ta-ta for now. Power to the people. Hit them with a high while you rest your case. Stay safe.
The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers, nor does it represent or compete against any mainstream media in the state of Michigan. It is also not for entertainment or debating purposes. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them. And it is for every sports fan's own good because the truth is out there.